To the representative of Libya.
سيد الرئيس يسرني أن هناك
President, it's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to congratulate you upon your election to the Security Council as Vietnam, and also to congratulate you upon your accession to the presidency for this month of January. Our congratulations also go to Tunisia, Niger, Estonia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines upon their election, and our thanks to the representative of Germany and Mr. Salame for their briefings to the Security Council. I apologize in advance if my statement is a little long today, President, but I think the situation in my country deserves an in-depth explanation. Allow me to begin by honouring the memory of all those who have fallen, whose blood has been shed over the 9 long years of crisis, those who have fallen in the faith of God, those who have fallen as martyrs. I'm speaking on behalf of the Libyan people and the people of the region who are currently in a state of anger and lack of trust and confidence in the international community, and that holds true for decades now. In response to their suffering and their problems, they've only been met with silence or with fine words, and that is supposed to make up for all that they're faced with: death, destruction, and displacement of peoples. It seems that the attempts are made to place the aggressor and the oppressed on the same footing in the actions of the international community, at least in some instances. The crisis in my country today did not come in a vacuum. It's the result of systematic actions and interventions for years now. In 2011, when Libyans took to the street to bring revolution to their country, together with peoples in the region, to demand their legitimate rights and freedoms, this council adopted a resolution under Chapter 7. Calling for the protection of civilians as its principal priority. What happened since then, since 2011? That resolution has been exploited by certain parties to destroy the country and to export crises elsewhere, and has been used in order to settle scores and to enrich people and to line people's own pockets. This has created chaos and conflict, making it ever more difficult to get back to where we were before, particularly as a result of outside meddling. The resilience of Tripoli today is not just a symbol of the courage and determination of the Libyan people, but also of the people of the entire region, and their determination to hold up their revolutionary fervour in the face of those who seek to stamp them down and not allow them to express their rights and their freedoms through oppression. What has exacerbated our crisis today is the actions and meddling of countries who have fear of the independence of our nation and our freedom to make our own national decisions. They know that Libya, because of its geographical location and its resources, could play a pivotal role in economic, political and security terms. Libyans want prosperity in their own country, but those who are meddling want prosperity for their own countries, and to get that prosperity, they're prepared to kill and maim our children, our people in Libya, because of their selfishness. A moral responsibility is borne by the international community and the Security Council for what we've been experiencing for the last 9 years now. Many of the victims of these crises have been women and children in all 4 corners of the country. We have been dealt with by 6 special envoys over the last 9 years, and the situation hasn't changed one iota since the beginning. The status quo continues deeply entrenched. For 10 months now, the level of aggression has been stepped up, and it seems that the Security Council seems unable to put an end to that aggression. 75 years after the creation of the United Nations, it's high time for genuine, real reform to be carried out in the work of the Security Council. A report by the Secretary-General was published a few days ago and made it clear the scale and magnitude of the violations and crimes that have been carried out by Haftar and the parties and bands that support him. This is an aggression in which he has called for jihad against Tripoli, and he repeated that call during the visit of the Secretary-General. This is unprecedented as an action and as an aggression and assault on our silences. We're a few days away from the National Congress, a national congress that was supported favourably by your council. The current aggression has been in the wings for years now. A lot of equipment has been procured from foreign sources, and many mercenaries from Chad, from Sudan, and from other countries have entered into the country, and that's well documented. The report of the Secretary-General in paragraph 22 makes it clear that Haftar and the forces affiliated with him have carried out more than 1,000 airstrikes, including 60 precision airstrikes by foreign fighter aircraft. On the 4th of December, these aircraft bombed the military training institution in Tripoli, killing 30 young cadets. That took place on the 4th of January this year, I beg your pardon. These are young military cadets who represented the whole people of Libya. How can then this army, these armed forces, have to claim that it is the Libyan National Army when it is prepared to kill the children of their fellow nationals, of their compatriots? The actions of the LNA have led to the killing and the expulsion of tens of thousands of women and children, of old people, of the most vulnerable. 4 children were killed yesterday at school. The bombings and the airstrikes target hospitals as well as family homes. They lead to the death of doctors, of entire families. Civilian airports are also targeted, as well as schools and other civilian infrastructure. And the perpetrators are not named and shamed by the Security Council. The detention of immigrants in Tajura has not been spared from the bomb strikes by foreign aircraft in July last year, with 53 killed from amongst those immigrants detained, and the majority of them Africans. UNSMIL's report refers directly and explicitly to that, as did the Human Rights Council. These are but a few examples of a series and raft of violations and crimes that have led to displacement and other suffering that is unprecedented in the history of Libya. Heaped upon that is the closure of oil ports and the manipulation of the assets and heritage of the Libyan people. The report of the Secretary-General itself states that in the eastern part of the country, Haftar's militias have been responsible for a series of murders and assassinations amongst the people of the country, and that sometimes flagrantly, but other times in secret circumstances. They're also responsible for abductions and for torture, including the parliamentarian Seyhan Sagisa, who's been missing for 6 months now. But she is just one of many. And faced with all of that, we're supposed to treat the aggressor and the people being aggressed on the same footing, as if they have the same rights, the same right to be heard, the same voice. These are violations and crimes. We have evidence of these violations and crimes. The report of the panel of experts also made it clear the involvement of the United Arab Emirates in what's going on. 11 times mention has been made of the fact that the UAE has provided armed vehicles, drones and aerial support systems to a party at war. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sudan the day before yesterday also stated that several Emirati companies are recruiting young Sudanese later to deploy them to Libya, and they're not aware of where they're being deployed to as they're recruited. Report 812 also contained information on the provision by the Egyptian authorities of equipment and their involvement in airstrikes in the west and east of Libya. And so we are forced to ask that question, why this interference, why this meddling? The United Arab Emirates is thousands of kilometers, thousands of miles away from us. So are they not supporting a coup d'etat? And if so, why? Why are they undermining our national security? We also don't understand how the big brother of the Arab community can step forward to support those who are killing their co-Arab citizens in Libya, those who are involved in sowing chaos and disaster in the country, in the region. This is unprecedented between our two neighbouring countries. I'm speaking, of course, of Egypt, who we see as our big sister, our big brother in the Arab world. It is important that those who are currently supporting the LNA and sowing crisis should instead back peace and security in the region. Rockets have been found, and it is claimed that these rockets were sent or were dispatched to support French special forces. That claim has been made. Was the Commission of the Security Council sought and accorded for the involvement of the French special forces and their rockets? People do not seem to be alive to what's going on. And rather than supporting war and conflict, you should be supporting peace. Otherwise, the Libyans will not forgive you for the fact that you have failed to prevent and have indeed engaged in the spilling of their blood in some instances. We cannot accept a peace that is partial in nature, that exposes an ongoing basis to risk, to threat. Our armed forces are the heroes of the operation. They have proven their resilience, their determination, their willingness to sacrifice themselves to put an end to the aggression by the aggressors, to push them back from the doors of Tripoli. We are exercising our legitimate right to defend our people, our infrastructure and our cities. We do nonetheless support all efforts by the international community to keep an eye on these violations and to follow up on them. But we do ask ourselves, what is their pragmatic, tangible use if it's just words? Several countries have a stake in what's happening in Libya. They have a role to play here. Either the accusations that we're putting forward are erroneous and that should be proven, or they should accept that they have been found out, involved in these nefarious actions, and they should stop doing what they're doing. We are sick and tired of being the proxy battleground of the world. We welcome any initiative to restore peace. In that framework, we wish to underscore the critical role being played by the African Union, which some are seeking to marginalise and to push out into the cold. We thank the African group for their work in the Security Council in particular. And we thank in particular the President of Congo, who hosted the African Union Committee on Libya, which met this morning in Brazzaville. Haftar did not choose to participate, thumbing his nose at African concerns. We support this African solidarity in our drive towards reconciliation. And we hope it will dovetail with the efforts of the Special Envoy in the UN plan. We welcome Russia and Turkey's initiative to implement a ceasefire, despite the fact that our counterpart, Haftar, refused to sign up to that agreement in Moscow. We hope that the Russian Federation will continue its efforts in order to ensure that this initiative can go somewhere. We'd also like to thank Germany, and in particular Chancellor Angela Merkel, for having hosted the Berlin conference despite all the difficulties and challenges in the run-up there too. I would like to clarify the following point. The ongoing violations by the aggressor that have taken place after the Berlin conference, its refusal to sign up to the ceasefire agreement, its refusal to participate in the JMC 5+5 committee thus far, which was supposed to meet for the first time in Geneva the day before yesterday, confirms once again that the aggressor has no intention of pursuing peace. And this has been said openly by its own spokesperson last Sunday when he said, "We will go to the international conferences not to find solutions. We are firmly convinced that the solution lies in rockets, grenades, ammunition and weapons." End of quote. If I may turn now to my second major theme. As we pursue truces and ceasefire, we need to consider how we can engage in a truce and a ceasefire if the aggressor is not to be taken seriously and refuses to return to their original lines and their bases. That needs to be sine qua non for any truce or ceasefire. The Security Council has adopted a resolution, and this is my third major theme, or is intending to adopt one to support and embed the Berlin outcomes, the outcomes of the Berlin process, which are a very serious and tangible set of outcomes, which should hold accountable those responsible for prosecuting the war. We will continue to work alongside all countries and international fora to ensure that this takes place. Any dialogue needs to be based on the Libyan political dialogue. Any move forward needs to be based on the constitutional process and the will of the Libyan people. It needs to allow for presidential and parliamentary elections under the auspices and monitoring of the United Nations and the international community in order to ensure that Libyans themselves can freely choose at all levels of society, irrespective of their political adherence, to decide the future of their government, of their institutions, and forge a democratic government. Ladies and gentlemen, there are three excuses or pretexts that are always trotted out to justify aggression: the fight against terrorism, the elimination of armed groups, and the fair distribution of wealth. As far as the fight against terrorism is concerned, we have always cooperated with various states, first and foremost the United States of America, to eliminate the scourge of terrorism, irrespective of where it springs up. The liberation of Sirte from the hands of Daesh is an example of that. That liberation was guaranteed by the heroes of our country, heroes today, and the leaders of whom are accused of terrorism, bizarrely and paradoxically, and who are killed in a violation of the truce. 10 alone were killed last Sunday in an attack on the Bugrain region. We cannot deny that all Libyans have made sacrifices. All Libyans have stood up and been counted against terrorism, whether that be in the east, the west, the north, or the south of our country. But there are those who exploit the blood and the sacrifice of the Libyan people, and they do so in order to get their hands on power. As far as armed groups are concerned, we have to admit reality. There are armed groups in all towns and all regions of Libya of one stripe or another. There are tribal armed groups. There are armed groups based on ideology or political adherence. You can't put them all in the same basket. The ongoing chaos and the spread of weapons and ammunition in the country, which has been a reality for several years now, is a reason to explain this mushrooming of armed groups of different affiliations and different beliefs and different aims. And they receive backing and financial support, sometimes from outside. And despite the many security arrangements that we have made together with UNSMIL and other partners, we have been able to reduce the number and the ability of these armed groups to carry out their predatory activities. We've been able to eliminate several of these groups. The extent to which we've been able to bring about security by stamping out some of these armed groups is inherent in the fact that 40 diplomatic missions are now opened in Tripoli, for example. Many young people join these armed groups, and they do so for a lack of other alternatives. Many of them love their country. They are true patriots. This is a problem that will not be resolved through armed confrontation, which is a message that we need to transmit. It will not be resolved through the imposition of a military government, but we will only be able to address their concerns, their needs and aspirations through the setting up of a legitimate government that can provide for economic growth and opportunities. The third pretext that is given is a wish to redistribute wealth more fairly, but that is a pure lie. It's pure propaganda. We make sure that all of our revenues as the state are made available to the Libyan people first and foremost, including our oil revenue and the majority of the outside aid that we receive, often to the extent that we are unable to provide for some of the basic services that the state should provide. The parallel national bank printed 11 billion dinar recently outside the control of the state, and that undermines our ability to bring about economic order and stability and to be able to boost our revenues beyond the simple incomes and receipts that we're able to get our hands on from donors or from the limited oil revenues. So it's clear that Libya needs radical reform. We need legislation. We need a single central bank that is respected as being so, and we need to make sure that we take steps against corruption. We cannot deny that. But the distribution of wealth, the fair distribution thereof, is guaranteed by the constitution of the state. So this cannot be used as a pretext for the aggressive activities that are being carried out from certain quarters. The constitution was drawn up, and unfortunately the referendum to fully embed it could not go forward because of the abuses by those who continue to pursue their aggressive stance in order to pursue their own interests. Through the Libyan Investment Authority and in coordination with the panel of experts, we have rolled out a new strategy for good governance and transparency in our administrative system, in our civil service. I repeat a point that we've made in the past. We don't want to see the asset freeze lifted at this current stage of discord and division, although we know there are some countries and banks who exploit that asset freeze. Nonetheless, we would call for a slight easing of that assets freeze in order to prevent the annual losses that we see at the central government level, which sometimes rise to tens of millions of dollars. Assets have been frozen of companies that are affiliated with the Libyan Investment Authority. We believe that to be an erroneous step because it can have an adverse impact. We need to nuance the assets freeze, in other words, and we hope that is something that can be discussed going forward. We have always been at the forefront of any actions to put an end to the bloodshed of Libyan people, and we spared no effort to prevent their blood from being spilled. Previously, we were very close to reconciliation with all those concerned, including the parties of the former regime, and bringing about reconciliation between the towns and the tribes, or the cities and the tribes. We saw many displaced persons and immigrants return home. Unfortunately, we have lost that ground, but the battle today is not between the East and the West, as some seek to claim. This is a war being carried out by a single individual in his thirst for power, fueled by the blood of our citizens. Rather, the battle that should be being waged by young people is that of reconstruction and rebuilding, rather than that of destruction and demolition. Everyone should be aware that the Libyans will reconcile. Nobody will succeed in sowing permanent discord between the Libyan people. And once we have the rule of law fully up and running, and we have the rule of law in place, it's part of our drive forward, then we'll be able to pursue those responsible for trying to sow this discord. Libya has received a body blow today, but it is down rather than out, and it will rise again tomorrow, even though that be at the displeasure of some, but for a brighter future for all its people. Thank you very much, President.
I thank the